evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Jacqueline Lukman, and I am the moderator for Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ. Moderator is just a fancy title for the person in the congregation who is not the pastor, who gets to tell the pastor what to do, pretty much. That's what I do. Not sure how they decided I should be the one to have this position, but he let it happen, he meaning Reverend Braylon Scott Hagler, who is actually giving quick remarks over at the Lenten service over in the sanctuary. So he is going to finish his comments over in the sanctuary and run over here. But I want to thank you for coming out tonight for the second anniversary commemoration of the organization of the Black Alliance for Peace. And I have to tell you, I'm very, very proud to be not just a member of this organization, but for some reason, Ajamu Baraka and Netfa Freeman and other members of this organization have seen fit to allow my husband and myself to have a very active role in all of the wonderful work that we do. And that's really important to me because I have been an admirer of Ajamu Baraka for a very long time. I try not to get fangirly about, so-called famous people. But when I interviewed him for a small online outlet a few years ago when he was running as vice presidential candidate for the Green Party, when he accepted the invitation to interview him, I looked at the email and I squealed like a child. I did. And then when I had my first conversation with him, it was supposed to be an interview, but it turned into a conversation because I was so excited that I actually said stuff that that man agreed with. So from that one interview, we developed this really, really great relationship based on just his long history of amazing humanitarian work and the work against capitalism and imperialism. And my husband and I, are very fortunate that we belong to a church in which our pastor is just as radical as we are, who is not afraid or ashamed of the word radical. If he could, he'd put it in the name of the church, but we belong to a denomination. So what we could do was put a Black Lives Matter sign out front. That's what we could do. But Reverend Hagler is a cornerstone of resistance and protest and standing up for the rights of oppressed people in this city. I'm not just saying that because he's my pastor, and he's also our friend. But yeah, absolutely. A few things that you might not know about Reverend Hagler in this church: the senior center that's on the corner, right across the street, is the result of a 10-year battle that Reverend Hagler waged against Exxon. They wanted to build a gas station on the corner. And he said, we don't need another gas station. And he said he pulled some people off the street, went to the liquor store, gave a couple of guys standing in front of the liquor store a couple bucks and said, y'all can come down to the corner on North Capitol Ridge Road and y'all can stand in front of this bulldozer with me. And he gave them like $5, $10 each, and they did. And that is how a 10-year protest against Exxon building a gas station that nobody in this community needed started, and it ended with the capitulation of the behemoth Exxon giving up the fight for that property and calling Reverend Hagler and saying, okay, fine, what do you want? What do you want? And that's how the beginning of that development of the senior center started. Recently, he spearheaded the fight to ratify Initiative 77 in this city, to pay tipped workers at least the minimum wage. And we all know what happened in this city with the city council voting to overturn what voters in this city voted for. Reverend Hagler got a bunch of people got some petitions out, got people to sign petitions, went to court to sue the city to recognize the vote. And I'll never forget at a Martin Luther King Jr. Day prayer breakfast at somebody else's church, Jack Evans, council member Jack Evans, and a few other council members were in attendance, and Reverend Hagler proceeded, and our friend Sean Blackman is sitting there nodding his head because he was there to witness. Reverend Hagler proceeded to tell these people at the church prayer breakfast with all the nice holy people, you can't disrespect the vote, Jack Evans. You can't disrespect the vote, Trayon White. And he did this, he just went down the list of all the council members who were there, telling them that they were wrong for disrespecting the vote of district residents, of poor district residents, of black district residents. So Reverend Braylon Hagler is not one to shy away from the work of standing up for oppressed people. He's not one to shy away from challenging authority. One day you'll have to hear him tell you the story about how he chained himself to a fence in front of a construction site in Roxbury, in Boston, so that the construction company would hire local workers. He is not one who is afraid to fight for the self-determination of all oppressed people around the world. And as a member of Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ, I am proud that you are here tonight, that we are here to host you here. We really do hope that you not just take a lot from this event, but that you come back and visit us and join in this work with us. So he's still over there talking. He talks more than I do. So I'm going to have to go get him, but in the meantime...
Solidarity statements, and then when he comes in, we will pull them up.
All right, so we have some statements that we would like to share with you from some Friends of Black Alliance for Peace. But right now, I would like to introduce to you Sister Jaribu Hill. She is the founder and executive director of the Mississippi Workers Center for Human Rights, the founder of the Southern Human Rights Organizing Conference, and a member and friend of Black Alliance for Peace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sister Jaribu.
Look at the soft, weak applause. What? What's up? What's going on? Y'all not gonna be free with the quiet, polite, soft-spoken stuff, the cute stuff. You gotta get down into it. You can't be cute. You gotta be a resistor. You gotta be bold. You gotta be rude and rude with me. How you doing? All right, let's get Jacqueline another hand. Come on, that wasn't good enough. Give her another hand. We're going to ask Jacqueline to invite to the electronic screens and audio two solidarity speakers that we are privileged to have with us, Cornell West and Marielle Fanon, who is France Fanon's daughter. So she's going to be in the house, and so is Cornell by way of electronic liberation. So Jacqueline, take it away, Jacqueline.
Can you see? Jaribu, can you make the announcement? Announce the live.
Don't worry, we're doing this. We did the light. You got to do your part, though. Hey, Rose. Got that? The light.
Let's try this again. Apologize. I think we've got the bugs out now.
You still have a mute.
It's on mute right now, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Abdul Shahid Lukman. I'm reading the statement from Mario Fanon Mendez. I'm sorry. Okay. Some countries continue to deconstruct and delegitimize relentlessly international law, and especially by not respecting the United Nations Charter in the case of Venezuela. By defying the right of peoples to the right of their sovereignty, the United States and its little poodles, including France, are ignoring this right, acquired in blood by people too long colonized and living under the barbarity of their occupants. They prefer to foment coups, starve an entire people, rather than give up their predatory projects, among others for the United States, get their hands on Venezuelan oil. To do this leads for it to impose a blockade around this country, even starving and thirsting an entire people. The aim is to break the project of the Bolivarian Revolution, which brings social transformations for a large part of the Venezuelan people, hitherto ignored and invisible by the many successive governments. To achieve this, they call on a puppet who has no legitimacy. They accuse the Venezuelan president, ministers, and diplomats of corruption without any proof. Their goal is to build a negative image of Venezuela, only the current government would be responsible for the humanitarian crisis in the country. Once again, they want to make believe that the only way out is the military invasion. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Ivory Coast were not enough for them. They want to repeat the same scenario of interference in the name of the responsibility to protect. We know they're designed, and we know very well that they only want to hand over resources they have always considered as their exclusive property. By whom are human rights violated? Who violates the fundamental right of the right to life? Is it not those who organize the blockade of food or medicine?
Right.
Is it not those who hold the money of a country hostage pending its bankruptcy? Did they have not already established that to others, including Haiti? It is up to them to demand accountability. The victims of this blockade will have to go to the International Criminal Court of Justice for crimes against humanity. Fortunately, despite terrible difficulties to surmount, the Venezuelan people resist. Not only for him, but also for the whole of Latin America. He is also convinced that his sovereignty is priceless and that his country is not for sale to the strongest dominant. If he falls, the last bulwark against Western hegemony will fall, and South America will become the suburbs of North America. We who are defenders of justice, truth, and solidarity in the face of the stakes playing out on Venezuelan soil, we can only denounce these predatory liberticidal projects that undermine the founding principles of the Charter. We can only denounce the fact that these projects are once again on the backs of the Venezuelan people, instrumentalized by those who claim to care. Let us not kid ourselves and do not deceive ourselves, enemies. Let's affirm our support for the Venezuelan people. Let's stay up with the Venezuelan people. Y viva el pueblo venezolano libre. In closing, I want to congratulate the Black Alliance for Peace on their 2nd anniversary. I stand with Black Alliance for Peace in its continued fight against capitalism, imperialism, and global oppression enforced by white supremacist militarism. Right.
Yeah. Now I would like to bring up Reverend Hagler, revolutionary, man of faith, brother, family.
Thank you all. And again, congratulations to the Black Alliance for Peace on the 2nd anniversary. And I welcome you here to Plymouth Church, and you can see we're in the midst of a whole lot of construction, and we just thank you for being tolerant of us as you come here and gather, because what we're doing is not just sort of expanding space, but we're trying to make sure our space is accessible in the long run. So there's going to be elevators in that's already being put in, and lifts and ramps and all of those other types of things, because we believe that everybody should be able to come in and nobody should be able to be excluded under any circumstances. And that really comes down to us, how we build the movement. We've got to build the movement that brings all sisters and brothers together who are in the midst of struggle, and not exclude anyone for any particular reason, to knock down the barriers and open up the cause for liberation and the cause for freedom and hope. Woo! So I want to thank you for being here. I just want to say this as I just sort of move off. I've been, last June, 9 faith folk were locked up for praying in front of the Supreme Court. Uh-oh. And I was one of them. And we were praying on the day that the Supreme Court ruled that Ohio could purge its voting rolls. So we prayed in front of the Supreme Court. We were locked up and we were held for over 36 hours. And the agreement for being released was that we had to surrender our passports. So the federal court still has my passport, and I still got to report to the court every single week. and we have not had a trial yet. And it's supposed to be all resolved when the trial happens, and the trial was supposed to be May. Now they're trying to push it to October to make sure that we just don't get our passport back. And in other words, we've been convicted before we ever had a trial. But we understand we should not be surprised. That's the way the United States of America is. When you stand up for justice and when you stand up and oppose this system and the oligarchies in this country, then you are held accountable to a different standard. But that makes us have to be the warriors that we're called to be, to stand up for justice no matter how folks threaten us, no matter what people do to us. We got to be the people that are standing on the consciousness of power, and power comes out of an ability to stand against all odds. And when we stand against all odds and we do not separate ourselves from one another over little sectarian things, that's when we win. So let's win.
That's the only kind of preacher I want to hear from. I hear from no pleaders instead of real leaders either. Black Alliance for Peace. That's what you're here for. If you came to something else, you might be in the wrong place. But if you're here for the 2nd anniversary of Black Alliance for Peace, then you're in the right place. No compromise. No retreat in the fight to end militarism and war. Now we're live feed, and Julie will kill me if I don't tell you this. We're live feed on Facebook. If you are on watching, then what we want you to do is share. If you're sitting in this room right now, we want you to share to others. And those who are listening, please share the fact that we are live feed. And so if you're worried about being here, worried about somebody seeing you, too late. Too late. I know it's too late. It's too late for me. It's been too late. And I ain't worried about it. I hope you do see me. I hope you do see me. I try not to be invisible. So yeah, we're live feed. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for letting us know that. Thank you for getting us on. No compromise. And that's the favorite phrase for me. No compromise. Every time we compromise, we give up what? We give up just a little bit more of ourselves. We give up our right to be human, our right to live. I remember when Paul Robeson's passport was taken away because of betrayal of Jackie Robinson and others who testified against him. I remember how that brother never recovered from the loss of his passport and the loss of his dignity and humanity in this country. This country has a lot to pay for. Right. For the strange fruit, the cannon fodder, the casualties murdered under blue lights and tin shields, the auction block, the wars we didn't make, the body bags, the broken promises, the stolen wealth, the misery, the genocide, the wars we did not make. The wars we did not make. And Marley said it all until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. Everywhere there's what? War. Everywhere there's what? War. Y'all too weak to fight. Everywhere there's what? War. Everywhere there's what? War. Everywhere there's what? War. I can't hear you. You're sucking the life out of me. Everywhere there's what? War. What? War. I believe it. What? War. All right, and we gotta fight. We gotta fight for our motherland, Africa. We gotta fight for Palestine. We gotta fight for Venezuela. We gotta fight for the Mississippi Delta. We gotta fight to get statehood here in D.C. Come on now. No justice, no peace. So we say war. And for his profound and prophetic way of speaking truth to power, Dr. King was killed by the state. Yeah, of course. For holding up the mercenaries' lies to the light and condemning what he called imperial wars. The Vietnam speech was truly a defining moment, and we know that. The Vietnam speech was a defining moment that separated him from the pleaders pretending to be leaders, from poverty pimps and lackeys masquerading as servants of the people. You know who they are. You know who they are. Warmongers and domestic terrorists. He said a time to break the silence. A time comes when silence is betrayal. You betray yourself when you don't speak up and stand up. Bringing the war home, he said, I knew I could never again raise my voice against violence of the oppressed ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, my own government. King accused the U.S. of increasing military costs while taking money away from domestic programs meant to fight poverty and racism at home. Instead, he said, young black men crippled by our society were being taken 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia. And that's where I departed from, my brother. Because I don't believe for a moment that they were going there to free our brothers in Southeast Asia. It was all about domination, control, and colonization. It's never been about our liberation or the liberation of people who look like us, or the liberation of people who are shaded away from white skin privilege. Turncoats on both sides, black and white. That's why we got to talk about class. Black and white.
That's right.
Blasted King for uniting the peace movement with the civil rights movement. Mind your own business, they said. But the freedom fighter, the defender of human rights, knew that speaking out against unjust wars was his business. And so it must be our business.
Right.
Luckily, I got built-in inspiration and I don't need y'all's dry ass applause, okay, to help me through, okay? And I had a really serious, I had a badder jacket than your mud cloth, but I didn't get to go to the hotel to change. So instead, I came in my uniform. My uniform. Racism is real. Racism is real. Racism is real, folks. If you ain't mad about it, if you ain't trying to get auction block redemption for the strange fruit, then you're not serious. And you just want to run alongside the lackeys. You just want to shuffle and scrape and bow instead of standing up for what's right. So that's what Black Alliance for Peace. Happy birthday to you. Come on. Happy birthday to you. Come on, a little louder. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. You're so dry. And you're boring. Okay, we're going to have some revolutionary fun along the way. Right now, it's time to get serious again. We got a serious brother coming up. Glen Ford. Glen, and I say it again, Glen Ford. And Glen is a long-time human rights defender and activist and revolutionary journalist. See, we ain't talking about no Don Lemon. Okay, we ain't talking or Van Jones. Or Van Jones, you're breaking my heart, Van. You're breaking my heart. We're talking about a revolutionary journalist. And see, the beautiful thing about owning your own stuff, you can just do your disclaimer. This ain't back talking right now. This is Jaribu. So when you go out and start quoting about what Jaribu said about this person, that, make sure you get it right and make sure you assign it to me, because I'll take it. I'll own it. We want to bring up Brother Glen because he's always had words for us in furtherance of the cause of liberation, in furtherance of the cause of dismantling the system that dragged our people through an act of kidnapping that murdered Native people, that causes us now not to understand who the real enemy is. This brother speaks it to us, and we're pleased and honored to bring up Brother Glen Ford. Yeah.
It's good to be in a house of peace where the pastor is leader of a congregation that believes in racial justice and gave us our invitation. The Black Alliance for Peace sees the anti-war movement and the social justice movement as inseparable. There can be no peace without justice, and no justice in the absence of peace. We're here on the anniversary of the day the world turned in Black America, the day they killed Dr. King. On the day before that cataclysmic event in April of 1968, I was a young paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne Division. I was out in the field doing exercises with my unit, the 82nd Airborne Division, in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My unit's duty on that day was to guard the division's headquarters tents. All that Wednesday, company commanders and executive officers filed into those tents, and they were studying maps of Washington, D.C., so that the division would know how to deploy its troops if we had to occupy the city in case of an insurrection. The very next day, on Thursday, Dr. King was killed, and we were airlifted to Washington to pacify the city. That city was burning, as were 100 other cities across the country. I didn't know what the commanding officers thought their mission was, but the black soldiers of the 82nd Airborne Division knew what our assignment had to be. As far as we were concerned, our mission came from Dr. King and from Malcolm. That's right. Just 2 years before. At that time, the 82nd Airborne Division was 60% black. And the black troops on that day were united in the mission of ensuring that the white soldiers didn't harm one head in Washington, D.C. All of us were aware of what had happened in Newark, New Jersey just a year before. That's when a lily white unit of the National Guard was called in to put down a 4-day rebellion against police brutality in Newark. The guardsmen rode up and down Springfield Avenue. That's a major thoroughfare in Black Newark. And they were shooting off their weapons like drunken cowboys. They made special targets of the stores that displayed Soul Brother or Black-owned signs. 26 brothers and sisters and children were killed in Newark. The black troops of the 82nd Airborne Division swore that the racist occupation of Newark would not be repeated on our watch, not in D.C., after they had killed Dr. King. And nobody was harmed by the occupying 82nd Airborne Division in 1968 because the black soldiers would not stand for it. And that is not just an anecdote, brothers and sisters. That was the beginning of the end of the draft in the United States. The U.S. military discovered that it couldn't control a black ghetto army, that these heavily black units saw themselves as guardians of the black population and not as occupiers. And that meant that the elite units of the U.S. Army could not be depended on to carry out counterinsurgency duty in U.S. cities. And that, in turn, meant the militarization of the police would have to be accelerated. I want you to understand the connection there. That black ghetto army was also not cooperating with the war managers in Vietnam either. They refused to offer themselves up as cannon fodder. And when they filled up the military prisons in Vietnam with black soldiers, the black soldiers burned the prisons down.
Yeah.
Now, I'm telling you these stories because that's the usefulness of elders. We remember things. The anti-war movement of that era thinks that they defeated the draft. And certainly the civilian mass movement was a huge factor in getting rid of mass conscription. But after 1968, the Joint Chiefs of the U.S. Armed Forces were already despairing about the usefulness of a draft army that wound up filling elite units like my 82nd Airborne Division with majorities of black soldiers, young black men with guns who refused to be counterinsurgency killers either at home or abroad. That would just not do. They had to make that change. If you tried to reinstate the draft today, it would be the top military brass that would be the most vocal opponents of the draft. They love the all-volunteer army. Ashton Carter, who was Obama's defense secretary, said they love the all-volunteer military because they get to pick who serves in it. And today, my old paratrooper unit, the 82nd, which was 60% black back in 1968, is the whitest unit in the whole U.S. Army. Wow. That is by design. Blacks still make up a disproportionate share of the Army, about 20%, but they're clustered in support units, driving trucks, supply units, things like that. Right. They keep them away as much as possible from the combat arms. The super elite troops of the Special Operations Command are overwhelmingly white, and that is by design. Those troops now number 80,000 strong, and that's almost as large as the entire French army. Those are the mobile killers that the U.S. deploys around the world to snuff out insurgency against the empire. Those are the units that have swarmed all across the African continent, largely in secret, killing people in countries that they can't even locate on a map and can't even pronounce the names of.
Right.
And when they are killed, it's a surprise to the folks back home who didn't even know that the U.S. had troops in Niger until 4 Special Forces soldiers got killed there. How many Africans these killer elites slaughter is a secret, except, of course, to the Africans themselves, and their families and friends who know full well that the United States is waging multiple wars on the African continent, all of them in secret. It's also a secret to the Congressional Black Caucus, because the Congressional Black Caucus does not want to know.
That's right.
This is a caucus that calls itself the conscience of the Congress, but has hardly raised a peep over the last 25 years as 6 million Congolese have been slaughtered. It is the greatest genocide since World War II, and it gets bigger every day. It is still ongoing. In raw numbers, it now surpasses the murder of Jews by Hitler in World War II. And these 6 million have died because of invasions of the Congo by regimes that have been armed to the teeth by the United States. I'm talking about Rwanda and Uganda. After 25 years of genocide, one can only conclude that these killers are doing the bidding of the United States, which finances them and gives them their guns and their bullets, and also protects them at the United Nations. But the Congressional Black Caucus has taken no effective position on the Congo genocide. They've had 25 years to do so, and they have said nothing. Why? Because the U.S. government wants them to be silent.
That's right.
They can talk about Darfur and the repression of folks in South Sudan before independence because the U.S. opposed the Sudanese government. So that's all right for the Congressional Black Caucus to talk about. But they will not condemn genocidal regimes in Rwanda and Uganda because those are U.S. allies, and 6 million Congolese mean nothing to that caucus. For that and a host of reasons, that's why the Black Alliance for Peace gathered thousands of signatures on a petition demanding 1, complete withdrawal of U.S. forces from Africa, 2, the demilitarization of the African continent, 3, the closure of U.S. bases throughout the world, not just in Africa, but everywhere, and 4, demand that the Black Caucus oppose AFRICOM and that it conduct hearings into AFRICOM's impact on the African continent. We shall see what impact that petition has on the black members of Congress. There are now more than 50 of them, but it seems that the more there are, the worse they get.
It's true. It's true.
Back in 2011, after President Obama had been bombing Libya for nearly half a year, killing tens of thousands of people, a bill was moved through Congress to halt that bombing and to recognize the authority of the War Powers Act, which was in force. Half of the Congressional Black Caucus voted to continue the bombing. Even an unprovoked attack on an African nation is not enough to move the Congressional Black Caucus. Obama said that the War Powers Act was not relevant because the attack on Libya was not a war at all. And it was not a war at all because no Americans had been killed. And so the first black president made history with a new doctrine, an Obama doctrine. And that doctrine says that wars only exist when Americans are killed. And if the U.S. can kill thousands of people with bombs and with drones without suffering any of its own casualties, then that's not a war at all. That's not even hostilities. And the Congressional Black Caucus let him get away with that. So much for international law. Long before there was a Donald Trump in the White House, the United States has claimed immunity from international law. But international law is also United States law. That is the law. All treaties that have been ratified by the U.S. Congress have the force of law in the United States. And Obama was snubbing that law, the War Powers Act. Therefore, it is U.S. lawmakers that should have been most upset at the snubbing of law. And black lawmakers should have been even more angry at the attack on an African nation, but that didn't faze them. By the summer of 2011, the NATO war against Libya was already destabilizing the whole northern tier of the African continent. But the Black Caucus, which calls itself the conscience of the Congress, continued with business as usual. Most of us have no illusions about politicians of the two corporate parties. But what about the black masses? That's what we ought to be thinking about. Why do they allow their representatives to embrace war and to ignore the genocide of Africans? Aren't black Americans historically the most left-leaning, anti-war constituency in the country? Many of us have been saying that for a very long time. And it is true, they are the most left-leaning anti-war constituency in the country. Every poll has shown this, and they've shown this ever since black people have been counted in the polls. Black people have historically opposed U.S. military adventures overseas, and they have especially opposed U.S. military adventures in countries of darker peoples. And the reason is because black folks have always been skeptical of the motives of the United States, because we know what evil this country is capable of, and we know it because it's done all those evils to us. Just as importantly, Black Americans see the victims of U.S. foreign policy as people in ways that it appears most white Americans do not. And I'm going to give you the best example that I have to show this. In the weeks before the U.S. invaded Iraq back in 2003, the Zogby polling organization did a survey of public opinion, and they found that only 23% of blacks supported an invasion of Iraq versus 62% of whites. 64% of black folks said that they were strongly opposed to an attack on Iraq. And those are impressive anti-war figures. But then Zogby asked another question, and it went like this. Would you support an invasion of Iraq if it would result in the death of thousands of civilians? Only 7% of black folks said yes. And that is amazing. Only single digits of black America wanted to pursue a war that would kill thousands of civilians. That, I think, is a black consensus for peace that was registered right before the Iraq War. But a solid majority of white men said, yes, I don't mind the deaths of Iraqi civilians. And about a third of white women said that they were okay with that too. Only about 16% of Hispanics were thirsty for Iraqi civilian blood. Those numbers from 2003 show that there is a world of difference, a world view of difference between black and white America on issues of peace. Virtually nobody black wanted to kill Iraqi civilians. Black people really are fundamentally anti-war. But then Obama happened. And black people were suddenly more tolerant of war under a black commander-in-chief. In August of 2013, President Obama was threatening to bomb Syria, supposedly in retaliation for a poison gas attack. Subsequent investigations show that the Syrian military could not have carried out that attack. But Obama had already drawn what people were calling a line in the sand, so he was preparing to attack. The Washington Post and ABC conducted a poll in the week before that planned attack, and that poll found that 40% of black people supported Obama's threat of airstrikes against Syria. Only 38% of whites supported bombing Syria, and just 31% of Hispanics felt that way. That is, blacks were 2% more in favor of bombing than white people were. Now, majorities of all Americans at that time, during that week, were opposed to bombing, and Obama then was forced to call off his attack. Only minorities of all ethnicities were in favor of bombing. I want to make that clear. But this still was the first time in polling history that blacks were more in favor of war than whites were. This is Obama time. And that tells us something about the imperative to black unity. The imperative to black unity has served us well through most of our history in the United States. But under certain circumstances, that imperative can make us as dangerous to the world as white Americans are dangerous to the world if we extend that unity to warmongering black politicians. The Congressional Black Caucus certainly has no solidarity with black people, but it does love the cops, and it loves the Pentagon's weapons, and I'll show you how. In 2014, just 2 months before Mike Brown was shot down in Ferguson, Missouri, the U.S. Congress had a chance to vote on a bill that would have halted the Pentagon's infamous 1033 program.
That's right.
That's the program that funnels billions of battlefield-grade weapons and military gear into local police departments. When the Grayson Amendment came up for a vote, 80% of the Congressional Black Caucus voted against it. That means 4 out of every 5 black congresspersons voted for continued militarization of the police. They did so because Obama loved it. And Obama multiplied the 1033's funneling of weapons to local police 27 times, 2,700%. Not long after that vote, Ferguson went up in flames, and the Black Lives Matter movement emerged. It was a national phenomenon, the first blush of a mass movement, black mass movement, in 2 generations. And you would think that such a phenomenon would have an effect on the Congressional Black Caucus. I know it had an effect of a kind on the Democratic Party because they tried to co-opt it. But in terms of the caucus, last year, 75% of the caucus, that's 3 out of 4 of them, voted to make the police a protected class. That means if you hit a policeman, it is treated as a hate crime.
That's right.
With extra time in prison added. And we all know when the police kick your ass, they charge you with hitting them.
That's right. That's right.
So on top of all the other impunities bestowed on the cops, they are now given protected class status with the overwhelming assent of the Congressional Black Caucus, which has no conscience and no loyalty to the black community. So, what is our job in the Black Alliance for Peace? It is not primarily just to darken up those 2 white anti-war marches, although there is a need to darken up those 2 white anti-war marches. But what we must do is tap into the historical and real pro-peace sentiments of our people and help them disentangle themselves from false leaders and jive politicians that care more for the police and the Pentagon than for their own people, and who are unmoved by the slaughter of 6 million Africans. Such people are unworthy of us. So we are going to embarrass them first and then move them out of office with all deliberate speed. The people of Congo demand it. Power to the people.
We got a sister coming up if she's here, because I don't know the sister. Ife Tayo, are you here? All right, girl, come on up. She's going to bring us a cultural presentation. Good evening.
Okay, my grandmother just went to the bathroom and I kind of want her to leave.
Okay.
You want me to go get her? She just went. She's going to take a second.
Just something short.
What?
Really short.
Do another one?
You just something really, really short. And
That's my dad. Can I just tell us something about yourself? Yes. Sure. Okay, my name is Ife Al-Din, as my dad named me. And I work at Bowie State University. Okay. I graduated from there in 2017 with a degree in psychology. And my bio that was on social media says that I've been writing since I was 7, and I was inspired by my dad. Okay.
Well, we can do a chant, can't we? Can y'all do something? Can y'all stall for time at least? Come on, what do we want? Justice! Oh, God, my God. What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Keep up with me. What? Justice! Justice! Oh, I work hard. Goodness gracious. Oh, we can keep going. Let's do another chant.
I mean, I have a short poem I could do.
Oh, okay. No, you go. You go.
All right. Okay, since you guys don't want to hear that other poem, I'll go to what I was going to do. All right. I think of my mother when I think of war. The battlefield it made of her, the tug of it. I think of her eyes, pools for crude moments. I think of her back, knife still erect inside of her. I think of her hands, bruised from trying to stitch her own wounds. She reminds me of a third world country. I mean, a colonized country. I mean, they are one and the same. They are interchangeable, like I and you and we and she. She is the African diaspora. She is not the cause of her shed blood. She is the effect of a divisive system. We are one and the same. We are all the African diaspora. We are not the cause. We are the effect of love. I'm sorry. We are the effect.
That's all right.
Of a tug of war between love and hatred. You loving what we naturally have and hating yourselves for being without, for being average. I understand your past detriment, but your present one is more worrisome. The only real culture you have is imperialism. The only custom you have is capitalism.
Wow.
The only religion you have is genocide. The only country you have isn't yours. This is war. Killing kings in front of their store's property that's not theirs, that's not yours, yet they're somehow leasing from you. Killing kings for having dreams that you tried to zip tie and hold captive. Rest in peace to Dr. Martin Luther King. Are you mad my color is still captivating? That I am so in awe of my own skin that the art of war is of no interest to me? Sun Tzu's ideas are not too complex, they're just unnecessary. I speak peace over your manifest destiny. Pray you release those misguided attempts at peace. Pray you release that peace and you evaluate what you're really afraid of. Pray these prayers for peace aren't a lost cause for a cause we already lost. I am at a loss. We are tired of the desecration of colored people globally being your only focal point, of a broken lens being the only thing available when you focus, of black and white pictures being the only thing you can process. So then why in this unwarranted war is our color so serious? There's 3 more lines, but I didn't write them down. This is great.
So right.
Why is our color so serious? Aren't our ideas too impure for you? Aren't our riches too rabid to be ravished? And our oil too black to be anything but ravaged? Thank you.
Whoa, whoa. All right. Okay, y'all get the hang of this final. Oh, let's go. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, only one thing we did right was to stay in the struggle and fight. Keep your eyes on. Now I know y'all know it. Come on now. Reminisce back to the 60s. If you want to do something. Only one thing we did right was to stay in the struggle and fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Keep it going now. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Y'all too soft. Y'all too soft. Hold on, hold on, keep your eyes on the prize, hold on. Now if you think I'm too much, if you think Glen is too much, if you think Ife is too much, it ain't as rough as it's gonna get. It's going to get much rougher as I introduce the panel that's coming now. Are y'all ready for the panel? Oh, yeah. Are y'all ready for some more thought process think tank coming at you? I'm telling you right here. And we live. Say it with me. Live. Live. Feed. Feed. Live. Live. Feed. Feed. Y'all so soft. Live. Live. Feed. Feed. And share. Share. Don't be like this selfish ass country. Don't be like this selfish pull yourself up by your bootstraps government. Share. Share the feed. Come on up, panelists. I'm going to call you by name. I'm going to call you on up. Let's bring up Sister Margaret Kimberley, another big-ass journalist, another big-ass journalist, editor and senior columnist, Black Agenda Report. And I'm ashamed that I just subscribed today, but I will be reading every week from now on. Yeah, will you stop telling me? That's Netfa Freeman. Netfa Freedom. I said freedom. Vanessa Beck. Gina Gina. All right. We got Netfa Freeman, organizer with the Pan-African Community Action, PACA. We got Vanessa, who is with the Black Alliance for Peace Research Team and Coordinating Committee, and Baltimore organizer, Health Over Profit for Everyone Steering Committee. And we got our sister, Gina Best, who is here with us through great trial. And we appreciate you, sister. We love you. We hold you. And we will get justice. We will get justice. And so the order is slightly changed from what's in your program. We're going to have Sister Margaret Kimberley, and then we'll go with Sister Gina Best. You're okay with the order? Okay, honey. All right. All right, as long as you're okay. All right, let's go. And y'all know what the theme is, right? I don't have to repeat it. The theme, why we're here. Since y'all so quiet and tired, let me just tell you what the theme is one more time so you can have it. No compromise, no retreat in the fight to end militarism and war. No compromise. No retreat. No compromise. No retreat. No compromise. No retreat. No compromise. No retreat. And after Glenn, I would say no shuffling and backsliding and calming, because we about to be free.
Right.
Oh, you need, yeah. Come on, okay. Yeah. All right.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Good evening.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful to Reverend Hagler and his church for inviting us, for hosting us here. And before I start with my remarks, I wanted to mention something that I had seen on Twitter a few minutes ago. Apparently, the Ecuadorian government is indicating they're going to expel Julian Assange from the embassy in London, which, of course, is connected with all of the work that we do. This abuse of state power, this determination to silence a whistleblower is something we must all keep in mind. If you look at our website, the Black Alliance for Peace website, you'll see our mission statement. It says, quote, "The Black Alliance for Peace seeks to recapture and redevelop the historic anti-war, anti-imperialist, and pro-peace positions of the radical black movements," unquote. And yes, it was quite intentional that BAP was founded on this date, April 4th, the anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King's speech in which he renounced the Vietnam War, and the anniversary of his assassination. And I have to say, I'm glad that I'm old enough that even though I was a young child, I remember Dr. King as a living being, and not as this once per year nice man who gave one nice speech in Washington and then mysteriously got shot and nobody ever says why that happened. But even though I was a kid, I have a memory of that time when millions of people spoke openly about revolution, when people in our community admired the Viet Cong and the Black Panthers had a thriving membership. And that's this legacy that we seek to recapture. But our polity has been twisted and perverted after the liberation movement was destroyed by COINTELPRO, assassinations and political imprisonments. And now, 50 years later, the party that black people cling to is as much a party of corporate interests and militarism as the Republican Party. And in supporting them, we have ended up signing on to mass incarceration, endless war, and austerity. The targeting of black politics by corporate interests accelerated the political loss, but there was worse to come. A black man was elected president, and our historic affiliation with left politics was cast aside in favor of representation, the siren song of the black face in the high place. And Glenn already touched on this. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, but I will mention one thing. Before he was elected, black people identified with international struggle. We didn't believe what we were told about wars and interventions. And when we were told that foreign leaders were, particular leaders were enemies or adversaries, we assumed that those targets were worthy of our admiration. If no one in the United States supported Fidel Castro, black people did.
Right.
There was no question among black people that the Vietnam War was wrong and the struggle of those people was just. When Ronald Reagan attempted to kill Muammar Gaddafi, it was black people who condemned the act. But Gaddafi was eventually killed by an American president, and it wasn't by a Republican. The killing came at the hands of a Democrat, the black one, initials B and O. And the only thing more shameful than the US and NATO attack on Libya was the eerie silence from our community about this war of aggression. The voices of condemnation were too few, most of us had chosen to defend that face in a high place instead of the people whose country was destroyed. And that whole sorry episode tells us why we need the Black Alliance for Peace.
That's right.
Why we need a Black-led, people-centered movement, one that won't shrink from doing what King did on this day in 1967, when he publicly expressed his opposition to the Vietnam War. And he was not praised.
Not at all.
He was condemned by the media and by short-sighted and opportunistic people in his inner circle. The New York Times and the Washington Post and others of that ilk were blunt. They said he didn't have a right to speak about international issues. He should have stayed in his lane and talked about civil rights. But King knew he had to talk about all of it.
That's right.
About the public money spent on war instead of human needs, and about the wrongdoing committed by this government when it acted as the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. At BAP now, we attempt to follow in those footsteps. We march against war and US and NATO foreign military bases. We also protest police murder and all violence carried out by the state, whether within our borders or in Syria or Somalia. Like King, we declare a right, an obligation to speak to all of these issues. And to our friends in the peace movement, we make clear that there is a necessity for a Black-led movement in those ranks. Because not all of us were bamboozled by Obama and others. We have a unique stance because of our history, and we bring that with us in all that we do. Our movement could be stronger. Our numbers are not what any of us want, but we can change this by speaking to the issues that impact our people. The perspective of people who face racism in all of its forms is desperately needed, and our friends should welcome this leadership. A couple of days ago, I had an interesting experience on social media, which I'm addicted to, I admit.
Oh, my.
And I was on Twitter, and I responded to this actress, Maria Conchita Alonso, who's Venezuelan, and who's an anti-Maduro person. And she tweeted, "Imagine hospitals with no electricity or water, food and medicine rotting. We need military intervention now." That's an actual hashtag on the part of those forces, hashtag military intervention now. And I usually don't. When I see things that I think are crazy, I usually let them pass, but I chose to answer. And I said, Venezuela needs an end to sanctions, and Guaido must stop the sabotage of the electrical system. Do you want war? Do you want people to die? And I got a response from one of her supporters, and he said, I'll cut it short, I'll cut to the chase. He said, quote, "Ignorance like you better keep shining shoes," unquote. Now, nobody said anything about shining shoes, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that is a response that a white person or any non-Black person would never get. And I raise this issue, I relate this story, because that is part of my lived experience. And that remark was obviously clearly racist. And so I didn't need to read about a racial divide in Venezuela, about support or opposition to the government. My eyes and my common sense tell me where those people stand and where I should stand. So this is a moment which proves the need for the Black Alliance for Peace. And you can see that our sign says no compromise, no retreat. Defeat the war against Africans, Black people in the US and abroad. And this war is waged against us all over the world by the 1033 program, which sends surplus military equipment to police departments all over the country. So little one-horse towns have armored vehicles. And it may look silly and ridiculous, but this is deadly serious on the part of our government. Including members of the Congressional Black Caucus, most of whom voted to approve this program. And there's a very direct connection between people wearing military uniforms or people wearing police uniform whose job is to keep us under physical control or to kill if they should choose to. And it's also important to think about why we're needed as we begin this spectacle of a presidential election, which is less than about a year away. And we're always told to forget about foreign policy and support a candidate who's on the right side of domestic issues, because that's the best we're going to get. And we should make do with Democrats who make mealy-mouthed statements about opposing military intervention in Venezuela. And you notice how they say it. I'm against military intervention in Venezuela. They're not against sanctions. They're not against anything else that could overthrow that government. And they may even repeat the talking points of Trump and Pompeo and Bolton. Maduro's a murderous dictator, he's a brutal dictator, he's really evil, but I don't want military intervention. And, but we have to ignore that. And we have to do that every 4 years. We have to do it all the time. Because 51 years ago, Dr. King was told the same thing. He should be happy with Lyndon Johnson's largesse, and he should keep his opinions about foreign policy to himself. So if we claim to revere him on this anniversary, every April 4th, as so many people say that they do, we certainly can do no less. We can certainly do no less than to speak up and to say that we are going to talk about peace, we're going to talk about war, and we're going to make the connections between justice here and justice abroad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, Margaret set a precedence when I had to get up. It's a little bit more intimidating, but we'll do with it. My name is Netfa Freeman. I'm with Pan-African Community Action. That's a local organization here, at least for right now, because we're Pan-Africanists, which means we want to end up all around the world. But we're local, and we're fighting for community-based power in the Washington, D.C. area. And so we always say the struggle, what we're struggling for is not a fight against racism.
Right.
It's a fight for power.
Right.
Kwame Ture used to say, if a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If a white man has the power to lynch me, then that's my problem.
That's right.
So we can't do anything about whatever kind of racist, mentalities and problem things floating around in white people's head, but we can do something about the power, the disposition of power, and that's what we're fighting for. We're a proud member of the Black Alliance for Peace, and one of our main campaigns in Washington, D.C. is community control over police. Now, let's be clear. Sometimes we say that people think we're fighting for a review board or oversight. That's not what we fight for. Right. Community control over police is what we fight for. Everything else is redundant. So I'm on the coordinating committee of Black Alliance for Peace as well. Panka, did I say Panka was a member of the Black Alliance for Peace? And with Margaret, we're co-coordinators of the Africa team. And the Africa team leads up our Shutdown AFRICOM campaign, which you heard a little bit about, and I'm going to talk about the Shutdown AFRICOM campaign. But first I'm going to read what our definition of AFRICOM is. AFRICOM is the acronym for the U.S. Africa Command, a more formalized and coordinated U.S. military presence in Africa to carry out long-term geopolitical strategies for U.S. imperialism on the resource-rich continent. AFRICOM is the recolonization of Africa by the U.S. and is the enforcement of its part in the new scramble for Africa. Under the false guise of combating terrorism and dispensing aid. Today there are 46 various forms of U.S. bases as well as military-to-military relations between 53 out of 54 African countries and the United States. U.S. Special Forces troops now operate in more than a dozen African nations. When AFRICOM started about 10 years ago, the African people on the continent didn't want it. Right. People were up in arms. And I think people mentioned it. That was under George W. Bush. In fact, the only country that even entertained, they were trying to find a headquarters for AFRICOM. Now it's in Stuttgart, Germany, because they couldn't find any country except for Liberia is willing to entertain that. But they still ended up, but that's just that's what we call a comprador class, not the people. The people didn't want it, so they ended up not being there, right? And then comes Obama. That was in 2008. Right after George Bush, right after they established it, Obama came into office, and next thing you know, the Comprador class and all the people, some of the people tripping over their feet trying to, host AFRICOM, right? Or not host it, but inviting the U.S. to come. Ever since Obama came in office up until now, we've seen a 1,900% increase in the presence of U.S. Military bases and presence on the continent of Africa. And one of the things, there was a crazy article that came on not too long ago. It was in the Washington Post. It was this week. It was this week. No, maybe it was last week. The title of it was, Trump says ISIS is defeated, but West Africa, there are fears of extremism will get worse. And if you read the article, it's describing how the leadership and the president of Mali was saying, please don't we have this ISIS problem and these terrorist problems in our country, and if you leave, the military leave, don't stop, we need you over here. Now, this is ridiculously crazy because the problem that they have in the Sahel of Africa in terms of what we call the proliferation of Islamic, what's referred to as Islamic extremism, is a direct result of the United States policy in Africa.
Hello.
So they caused it, right? And then they want to, and the Comprador class, because the people on the ground never agree with this. I mean, I just keep using that word. People don't understand what that means. That's the people who are operating for foreign interests. They're supposed to be of a particular country, but they operate for some other interest in your country. We call them traitors. In South Africa, they call them people that was due a necklace.
Yeah.
People know what the necklace is.
Yeah, the necklace. Bring it back. Bring it back. Tell them about it.
The necklace was, and this was under apartheid South Africa, was what they gave to the traders. They would take a tire and douse it in gasoline and put it around the person and light it on fire. It was a necklace, and it was for the traders, the people who collaborated with apartheid in South Africa. Right? But anyway, I digress. So anyway, the responsible for the weakened state is U.S. policy in Iraq and Syria, and what they did in Libya was sort of what we call beating a hornet's nest. And they just, these are the people they supported in Libya, the Islamic extremists, or the people that wanted to take over Libya, and now and also Syria and all that, and now they're all over Africa, and now African leaders are begging the United States to come in and help them with this issue, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So AFRICOM is posed as this humane military solution for problems that the United States created itself. And we have the history of Mali includes France, and now we have to remember the history. Malcolm X said of all of the, this is a paraphrase, academic disciplines, history is best qualified to reward all research. It means we can't forget. We got to know what happened. So back when France and during the independence movements in France and Britain and all them, and the United States, when our countries were getting their independence and liberation, these countries were trying to undermine it.
That's right.
At the same time, COINTELPRO was going on here, and they were trying to do everything they could to repress the Black Panther Party and the American Indian movement and everything. The FBI had the COINTELPRO program. The CIA was in Africa doing the exact same thing.
That's right.
We got to remember that. How can they come now and pretend to be some benevolent provider of justice and democracy and fighting terrorism? We got to remember that. Sometimes they hoodwink us. And so we have to remember this kind of history. Now the neo-colonialist puppets, the bankrupt Comprador class, they could address the problems in their countries, because it's not about Islamic extremism. I mean, when you read the Washington Post article, it admits this is about land and limited resources. It's not just Islam. And the bankrupt Comprador class, they could do something with that. They could just not abide by neoliberal policies. They could do some programs that would more equitably distribute resources and land and all that kind of stuff, but they don't want to do that, right? And of course, they would become targets of the West. That's what they do when you start doing stuff for your people, then they make you a target. And so some people would say, well, that's an excuse. That would be an excuse for the people to say why they can't do anything for their people, but we got leaders that die for our freedom.
Exactly.
I mean, if you didn't become in a leadership worthy to stand up for your people and do whatever it takes, what good are you?
That's right.
Malcolm X said the price of freedom is death. Right. So we got to be ready to stand up and fight and die. And if we're talking about a liberation struggle, those who understood the need for armed struggle said sometimes we got to kill. It's just that cold-blooded, brothers and sisters. I mean, that's just the way it is. So now I want to finish this because I could go off because now there's talk now because this is how they confuse us. Always when what comes with military power is the soft power. And they use NGOs and NGOism, some of us talk about, to kind of confuse and muddy the waters. This is what happened since the independence movements and even in here, NGOism. We'll hear talk about the international community, even the media. What do they mean when they say the international community? They're not talking about the masses of our people. No. You know, when they say, what does the international community want? Now, you have countries like the USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development, and then through AFRICOM, it's called the carrot and the stick method. It'll be the troops providing, little rice and all that kind of stuff. Not stuff that's going to help us grow and diversify our crops and our, the things that we need to sustain us, just little crumbs to keep us dependent. And they'll have the military doing it so that people will say, when we say we gotta pull U.S. out of Africa, they say, but wait a minute. When like the cyclone comes and all that kind of stuff, they're going to think we need these forces to help us mitigate problems like that. We got to be, and they'll come to our sisters and brothers who are in college and entice us with jobs, U.S. Agency for International Development, and we going on thinking we doing something for our people, and all we doing is facilitate neocolonialism.
That's right.
I mean, and Kwame Nkrumah talks about neocolonialism. He describes it in a book called Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. One of the chapters is called The Machinations of Neocolonialism. He talks about these NGOs and the World Trade Organizations and the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. These are the places they come and get us, and we working for them, and we thinking we doing something for our people. We ain't doing nothing but supporting neocolonialism.
That's right now.
I'm sorry, and it's got to be like that. And I'm not telling you got to quit your job if you work for one of them, but at least become revolutionary and give us the information we need. The last few things I want to say is that and this is another thing that history tells us. It's time, because right now the United States is resorting to more militarism because they're not so much a world power. They're competing with like China. China is the main reason they're trying to increase their militarism, and a lot of things they're doing around the world is because they want to compete with China. And we have to be careful about the propaganda again, because they'll have us always talking about, what about China? So I'm not saying we shouldn't be worried about China, but they'll have us talking about that, and we ain't even talking about Africa. We're not even talking about what the United States is doing in Africa, or the militarism in our communities. I almost want to talk about the American descendants of slaves, which seems like a digression. But it's related, because if we think our history and our heritage started at the Middle Passage, then we don't understand our obligation to fight forces like AFRICOM. We won't understand that the 1033 program and AFRICOM are counterparts.
Exactly.
They're counterparts. They're the same thing. We are colonized people right here. We got the same, and it's not an analogy, it's the reality.
Wow.
We got the same relationship in this country to the forces of white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy as the colonized people do.
That's right.
Colonization is not about the geographical distance, it's about the relationship of power. We have to get colonized. When we start talking about oversight and all that kind of stuff, we ain't never heard no liberation force say, we need a more benevolent occupying force. And they said, we got to get rid of the occupation.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
So I'm going to end with this. Pan-African Community Action has community control over the police, and it goes in line with the domestic side of our campaign about Africa and getting the U.S. out of Africa and overthrowing AFRICOM. And we want, what we want to say is, not only does the need there needs to be a mass movement in the U.S. to shut down AFRICOM. This mass movement needs to become inseparably bound with the movement that has swept this country to end murderous police brutality against black and brown people. The whole world must begin to see AFRICOM and the militarized police department as counterparts.
That's right.
No compromise, no retreat. Struggle to win.
That's right.
Hello, I'm Vanessa Beck, and I'm part of that supporting. And I've been so engaged and moved by the other speakers that I can say that I'm not even nervous. But I would be lying. I'd be lying. But I'm just going to remember that I'm here to help share information. And I'm gonna go more into our domestic campaign and the situation for us domestically. Some of the things that we experience: lack of wealth, income, health, and autonomy that extend way back to when we were used as slaves to produce the wealth that this capitalist white supremacist empire was built on. And it only continues. Those of us who are not literally shot dead by the state or locked up or homeless are still struggling and dying. Our potential as human beings cut short from the brutal psychopathology of white supremacy, capitalism, and its structures and institutions. The stress of simply existing while black accounts for why, even when you adjust for so-called lifestyle choices, our people suffer disproportionate rates of chronic disease. Chronic stress causes high cortisol levels. High cortisol that's consistent causes inflammation, and inflammation is at the root of most chronic illness. Factors like diet account for less than 1/4 of the social determinants of health, while racism and socioeconomic status, basically where you fall in the hierarchy of white supremacy and capitalism, accounts for the rest. So no, it is not that Southern cocoon to blame, after all. So the quality of life in militarized, colonized black working class and poor neighborhoods in the United States are actually closer to quality of life in the majority black and brown nations that the United States bombs and occupies, closer to this than it is to quality of life in many other parts of the United States. I'm going to look at Baltimore, where I live. I know we have some other Baltimoreans here and watching online. So in Baltimore, the wealthy white Roland Park area has a human development index that's a measure of health, income, and education that is on par with the highest scoring nations in the world. They have a life expectancy of 84. However, black areas in Baltimore like Upton, Druid Heights, have a lower quality of life than countries like Iran using this measure, a nation that's struggling economically, mainly due to US and NATO wars and interference. Now, life expectancy in Iran is 76. Life expectancy in Libya is 77. Life expectancy in Druid Hills, Baltimore, United States, is 68. Wow. 68, that's on a par with the Gambia, Kenya, Namibia, Rwanda, and Ghana. So here are some more conditions for us colonized in the United States. Black and Latina women are evicted at disproportionately high rates, around 3 times more than white women. We are uninsured in greater numbers than white people. And when we do get health care, it's much more likely to be subpar. The infant death rate for Black newborns is twice that of whites. The Black poverty rate is 22%. That's near triple the rate for white people. And that's using the official standard of the poverty line, which is set ridiculously low at just under $25,000 for a family of 4. That's how poor you have to be to actually be technically considered poor in the measure of what you need to get benefits in the United States. Black unemployment remains twice that of whites and is 70% or more in some apartheid-level segregated areas. Black immigrants have the highest unemployment rates compared to non-Black immigrants. Black immigrants are 7.2% of the undocumented population, and yet they are 20% of those who are deported. Our children are subjugated to the school to prison pipeline, the school to military pipeline. We still have political prisoners, probably there's mass incarceration and so on. This is an incomplete list. Of course, Black and brown people also have a very long and strong history of fighting these conditions of repression, colonization, and imperialism across the globe. Unfortunately, we're up against a lot because U.S. empire ups its violence whenever we do. The two specific programs I wanted to mention, the 1033 program has already gotten a couple of mentions, deservedly so. And then there's also the police exchange program between United States Police and subtle colonial state of Israel police and military, and that's called the Deadly Exchange Program by those who oppose it. So just a little more about the 1033. We heard about how that enables any kind of law enforcement. And this includes even campus police, school districts, parks and recreation are all eligible to obtain reduced cost or free Pentagon weapons. Something that's known as well is that the more militarized the police force, the more likely they are to kill us. About more than twice as likely is what it's looking like. $6 billion in Pentagon equipment has been transferred to law enforcement since 1990. And $6 billion, that could instead provide health care for 2.5 million of the 4 million kids uninsured still in the United States. So the other major program, militarization domestically, this Deadly Exchange Program, these police exchanges between the US and Israeli police, this program started in 2002 as part of the United States response to 9/11, when they wanted to kick up their so-called counterterrorism program. So starting then, hundreds of cops and government agents have gone to Israel and they've learned these terrorizing techniques to keep a colonized people under control, and they're genocidal techniques. Thousands more police and other law enforcement have been trained in the United States by Israeli police and military. And very important to mention, I think, is that the Deadly Exchange is a reciprocal program. It is an exchange. The Israeli state realizes that the United States has a lot of experience and wisdom to offer in the area of terrorizing and occupying a segment of the population that has every right to be here. And Israeli diplomats consider Black radical organization in the United States to be a subversive influence on their own state. In an Al Jazeera documentary, there's a diplomat who says, quote, "The major problem with Israel is with the young generation of the Black community. Black Lives Matter." So it's clear that poor and working class Black and brown people, no matter where in the world we are we're all considered the same problem by U.S. empire and by its allies. And they are very unified on this.
Yes, they are.
So we must organize an even greater unified response to this.
Right.
Yes,
And this is the point of our campaign: no compromise, no retreat. Defeat the war against African Black people in the U.S. And in closing, I'm just going to talk about how we plan to do this. We're connected with organizations already across the country who've been doing this work. We're reaching out to others because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, but to amplify and aid in the coordination of the work that we're doing. And we believe that this is part of building Black left unity. And we plan over the next few months to build a national coordinating committee for this domestic campaign work. And so if you would like, if you're an individual or an organization and you want to be involved in this effort, you can go to the page, and it's on the wall here, blackallianceforpeace.com/no compromise, no retreat. And we'll get everybody connected together. And I have no fancy ending. Thank you.
Brothers and sisters.
Good evening.
Before I speak and share my journey, I just want to say that the divinity in me honors the divinity in each one of you. Put on my glasses here. I stand here representing mothers, not only in the United States, but globally. I'm holding space. Before I share this with you, I want you each to know that, well, I actually have a favor to ask of each one of you. So I'm going to take off my glasses because I can see what you're about. Those of you who are mothers in here, can you just raise your hand? I'm going to take you through this exercise for a reason. Okay? I honor you. Fathers, please. Sisters, siblings, there'd be a lot of us. Brothers. Okay. Aunts, nieces, uncles, we'll just lump that all into it. I happen to be a grandmother of 8 beautiful children. Now I'm going to say, have you all heard of my daughter, India Kager? All right, so I'm not sure how many of you all are familiar with what happened to my daughter, but I'm just going to give you a brief overview, and I'm going to ask you just to send your energy so that I can contain as I speak, because every day for me is an uphill climb. My daughter, India, 27 years young, had traveled to Virginia Beach with the father of her son, Roman Kager. The father's name was Angelo Perry. He had driven up here to Maryland to meet India, the baby, because he was not, until a couple of days before they were murdered, a part of the baby's life. As they were traveling down to Virginia Beach, the Virginia Beach Police SWAT team, using the highly militarized gear, and I'll go into detail about that because I've learned a lot since then, were pinging Angelo Perry's phone, tracking his cell phone based on what they claim, and we know the narrative, all right, that they had received a tip from a confidential informant that he was on his way to commit a crime. Now, India and Angelo were en route down there to introduce Roman, because Evan is here, my other grandson, India's baby is here. But I haven't had the headphones on for a reason. I want to re-traumatize him. He is familiar, but nonetheless, I want him in that space. They watched my daughter, India, carrying Roman's car seat in and out of the car as they went from house to house introducing Roman. At 4 months old to Angela's family who resided in Virginia Beach. When I say they, brothers and sisters, I'm referring to a trained, highly militarized, planned operation consisting of 16 white men on the SWAT team, Virginia Beach Police. I have to emphasize trained because this was not a 911 incident where there was a call or exigent circumstances that existed why they had them assembled. But I want you all just to hold in your mind that this was because this was a black man. And that they did not see India or Angelo as humans. Neither one of them. They watched my daughter as she went in from house to house carrying Roman's car seat. They watched her go back in her car. They waited until India drove into a 7-Eleven parking lot. And as she was parking her car, using flashbang grenades, they threw flashbang grenades at my daughter's car while they ambushed her vehicle simultaneously. Do you all know what a flashbang grenade does? It renders one temporarily, you cannot see nor hear. No doubt, where did they get those weapons from? As they were ambushing my daughter's car, 4 SWAT officers jumped outside of the unmarked van, and then they commenced to firing over 51, not 30, I thought it was 30, 51 high-powered rifles, bullets into my daughter's car, fully cognizant that there was a baby and an innocent woman in the car. India and Mr. Perry were attacked on the very soil here that we call the United States of America, where life is not valued. So the reason why I asked you all to raise your hands and attest to your familial relationships in your space was, what would you do if it were you? What would you do if it were one of your loved ones? And police saw your loved one and cared not one iota for the value of their lives because they did not see them as worthy and deserving to live. That is the most unfortunate power, if you want to call it that, pseudo-power, that has been given to racist, white supremacist-led police forces across the nation. So I'm going to say a couple of other things here. It was not until India's wrongful death trial, because you all do know, and as you read the news, I am familiar with every mother you can imagine. Personally, Mike Brown. Leslie McSpadden is his mother, a beautiful sister. Tamir Rice. And I'm naming the names that are high profile. I stand with them, but I also stand with those who do not get the so-called media coverage as well. Because we live lives fraught with unspeakable trauma every single day. Tamir, Mike Brown, Eric Garner, choked by police. Corinne Gaines, shot dead with her baby, her son, whom I'm very close with. Rhonda just spent time with her. I want you all to know that I'm able to speak now and see your faces, but each one of you have a target on your forehead as well. Oh, yeah. If you are black, here in these states, you are not seen as a human being. So I speak from the heart. I walk with an amputated heart every day. There is no respite from the tears, the torrential tears, the pain that has wrenched our hearts. There is none. And then to make matters even worse, and they're exacerbated by people who call themselves supporters, when they really are not. They just are glad that they're not in your shoes. And choose not to do much to make sure that they never really are in your shoes. Let me just tell that. My daughter, India, life was snuffed out of her. 16 men. And not one of those murderers, I like to call them Neanderthals, were held criminally responsible. Not one. This is perpetuated every single day, every single year. We hear more and more. And we cry. Cries that are unheard. We protest in collective temper tantrums, where they still choose not to bring about change, because the the sister spoke about the Congregational Black Caucus. I want you all to know, I reached out to NAACP. I reached out to, and Brother Ajamu knows this, Al Sharpton. Actually, I was part of him. I can name these so-called leaders who are nothing but vultures.
That's right.
They have done nothing. Every single one of my sisters, and myself, my beautiful daughter, India Jasmine Kager, their lives were stolen under the Obama administration. Yet, he never once mentioned the lives of any of our children who've been murdered by police, not once.
Right.
The closest he got to it was saying that Trayvon Martin, who incidentally was not killed by police, could have been his son.
Right.
So that's placative and empty. And it does nothing to quell the constant onslaught and terror that is enacted by them. So I live with PTSD every day. Police terrorism, stress disorder.
Wow, wow.
Every day. And that beautiful little boy right there, I just need you all to know, that's Evan, that's India's baby. He was 4 years old at the time. His mother was stolen. His 4-year-old brother now, Roman, is permanently disabled. Permanently. So what are we going to do for the next generation that's coming up? That's the question. So you all who are fathers, mothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, what do you say to your child? What would you say when they grow up and they're aware and cognizant? Why did the police kill my mommy? I think about families overseas who have to go to bomb shelters. Every single continent the colonizers have been, they've done nothing but wreak havoc and destroy lives.
That's right.
So that is the default state of people with that mentality, not one of peace. They certainly don't stand for Black Alliance of Peace. They don't stand for peace. The default state of people who carry that is to murder and kill.
That's right.
And we have to pick up the shards somehow and piece our lives back together and deal with the disingenuous. People used to ask, Gina, are you okay? I stopped saying that. I used to say that to help the other people feel, okay, because when you're faced with your own mortality and you're faced with grief, there's this palpable, you can feel it. People just don't know what to say. They don't know what to say. You can't pray this away.
No, you can't.
You can't scream it away. You can't cry it away. This is centuries old.
Indeed.
Centuries. I think of my ancestor mothers as their children were taken from their arms and stolen.
That's right.
On this blood-soaked land here and globally.
Speak it.
Globally. So whenever I share and people ask, how are you doing? I never say I'm okay. We will never be okay. This is not something that time heals. If that were the case, would we be in a better position than we are now? Hasn't there been enough time? Hasn't there been enough? With Dr. King and his so-called civil rights leaders, if you want to call them civil rights leaders, we have no choice but to ascend until we, if we can, overcome. No choice. I'll never be okay. It's disingenuous to say that we will be. but I am standing here a warrior.
Uh-oh.
So let's go. Shift gears. When I say a warrior, you all have to imagine, talk about Mondays, imagine every day. Where before you're fully awake, you're in a lucid state of sleep, and then it all comes flooding back. My daughter, my son has been murdered. And that rage, where people say, you've got to forgive. Let me tell you all, I will never forgive. That has been preached by pulpits to keep people in a place of docility. That's right. So they do not rise up and truly fight. Because it is fear that drives them. That's right. I listened to Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, Dr. Neely Fuller, Dr. Amos Wilson. I'm a student of history. And India was as well, as soft-spoken as she was, very wise. The next generation, what are we really going to do? Are we going to just stand up here and talk about it? So that we can have a photo op?
Nope.
They invited me to speak with other mothers. And let me tell you something, I was the one who let them know I would never, ever be seen on the same stage with Hillary Clinton.
Hello,
we are not to prostitute the murder of our children.
That's right. That's right.
That's exactly what they wanted. But there's a sickness in our people. Let me address that real quick. I have seen the worst in our own people, even in the face of having our children murdered. Because the thinking and the frequency and the thought is, oh, I'm in the newspaper now.
Oh my God.
That's a sickness.
Sickness.
It's beyond a travesty. There's no words that even can articulate that pain. But when I see people, and I've been amongst some others, I choose to refrain from that. I lift them in a different way because I understand where they're coming from. I don't stand here perfect, never have been, don't aspire to be. But I'm not one who's going to lay down and give up. And I join my lock arms, and we do this in honor of every single one of our children who have been murdered at the hands of police. And I will also say at the hands of one another, community violence as well. Until we are black and proud and have a true alliance with one another, we will never have that peace that we so desire and we so need. But it does start here. Because everyone in this room, I would have to say, we do not espouse the thoughts of murdering people. We want to be that change. And that's what King spoke of. No compromise.
No retreat.
No retreat. No compromise. Let us not compromise in our actions. But before we can even do that, let's not be compromising in our thoughts. I'm going to share one other thing with you all. It is a harsh reality that we are constantly looked as black people. I'm proud. I love my melanated skin. I celebrate it. But we're constantly looked upon, constantly, by the oppressors. They see us, but they choose for us to remain invisible. Shocked, the shock value of another person murdered by police. The discomfort of what do you say? What do you do? Oh God, what do I do if it were me? They use flashbang grenades. And not one officer from every person that you all have heard of chose to make or take life-saving measures to protect the citizens of the United States, if they want to call them that. Innocent people, not one. We're doing it overseas as well. We have no business trying to colonize and fight for and murdering children, disrupting families. We have no business, but we're there. move forward. I'm going to wait when the shut's down. Okay. I have a couple of things I did want to say with you all, and I'm just speaking out of my heart. That those tears will never, ever cease. Ever. India's last action was trying to protect the life of her baby, my grandson. And we know the narrative that they always speak. They vilify the black man, and they try to sully the names. And none of them, have you all ever heard a police officer, a murderer, a mercenary say they were wrong? Have we yet heard our government say they were wrong?
No.
Let's not be that way now. I certainly am not. I'm a little subdued right now. But there are times when I just scream in rage. Because it's beyond frustrating when you have people tiptoeing around. I walk on glass shards, forget eggshells, glass shards, and burning hot coals, sulfuric acid every day. Have to rebuild our lives every day. They're doing it overseas as well. Brother Netfa, what country was that you mentioned? There was a country that, pardon? No. Where they're over there?
6 million.
Congo, 6 million.
6 million? Everywhere. Everywhere. So I honor the kings and queens. And I protect, and I speak and protect. The only way I've even been able to come this far was by opening space to my ancestors, imagining what did they go through. Determined to make a difference in the life of my grandchildren, but those who are around me as well. Determined. And that's what we must do, spread the word for the Black Alliance of Peace. Black Alliance for peace. But it begins here. We know that. I'm not going to stand here and regurgitate what you don't know. But for every bullet that I counted, I stopped counting India's bullets at number 8. Including the one she took to her head. 27 years young. And I see your faces, you all look. I didn't mean to bring you in that space, but I'm going to ask you to hold space. And we're going to raise that vibration and that frequency where we go out of here, hearts aflame. Hearts aflame. Where we're determined, absolutely, to defeat the war against Africans, black people in the United States and abroad.
Okay.
Because every last one of those murdering officers are just that. Tools of the government to keep us underhand and foot. I was going to sing a song for you all, but I didn't. Because I am a vocalist. I lost my song for a while. My daughter played 5 instruments in here. But I will close by saying this. There's so many notes here. We must ascend in our minds and in our hearts until we do what Dr. King wanted us to do, and that is overcome. And we have to know what it is we must overcome. But do it with the authenticity of his spirit, and do it with the determination that's within each one of us, those here, and then also the resolution knowing that we have to create a better space in the world for the next generation. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. Now I'd like to call up Maria Fernandez. Where y'all going? Hey, where y'all going? You know what? That's the problem with us. We don't have any stamina. We don't have any discipline. It's a 9 o'clock. Where you going? Everybody else stay put. Make a commitment to finish it out. Because if you can't finish this out, you can't finish getting liberated if you can't sit in your seat until the program is over. We got a couple more speakers. Let's show them some respect, and let's give respect to the sister who just poured her heart out to us. Sister Maria Hernandez from Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. Come forward.
Free the land.
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 By any means necessary.
By any means necessary.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Maria. I am a member of the DC chapter of the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. I am honored to share space with all of you. Netfa is going to be handing around a petition. We've been talking a lot around imperialism tonight. And the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement has a petition calling on the Congressional Black Caucus to demand hands-off Venezuela. In 2018, the New African People's Organization and the Malcolm X Grassroots Movement stood in solidarity with the Venezuelan people and traveled to Venezuela with an international delegation of folks that were observing the elections. And what we saw was fair elections. What we saw was sophisticated voting equipment. We saw safe elections. We saw hundreds of thousands of volunteers eager to engage everyone in their civic duty to elect their president. And they did. 68% of the Venezuelan people elected President Nicolás Maduro. And now, the Trump administration, the right-wing conspirators of the United States empire, are waging a war on Venezuela. Yeah. They're waging economic sanctions that are crippling the economy, right? And we know that it is about greed, about land, about oil, about resources. So we're calling on the Congressional Black Caucus to end the economic sanctions on Venezuela and to say no to military intervention, because it is not military intervention, it is war. Yes, it is. Right. So hands off Venezuela is our rallying cry against U.S. imperialism. Hands Off Venezuela is our rallying cry to support and protect New African peoples and oppressed people's right to sovereignty and self-determination. And Hands Off Venezuela is our rallying cry to support the Bolivarian Revolution. So we have some petitions. Netfa just passed them out. We have a whole bunch of them. Please sign on. Please demand that the Black Congressional Caucus take action and do what they have not done in the history of this country, is to say no to U.S. imperialism. Thank you.
So much, and please sign the petition. Want to bring up Sister Rose Brewer, who's going to give us some comments and remarks about some of the things that you've heard. And then I have one other introduction to make. Please bear with us, we're almost out of here. But then again, our people struggled for how many years in bondage? You can sit in those seats.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
What a powerful, powerful gathering. I do think we need to take a moment to breathe. Yes. And thank you so much for your heart. You know, in doing closing remarks, I mean, it's pretty common to say it's all been said. In some ways it has been. But I do want to lift up just a few observations about the Black Alliance for Peace and both the domestic and international struggle that we're engaged in. 2 years old tonight, a very, very incredible 2 years. But that 2 years is built on a long history of connecting to the Black radical international struggle. And that means a history of resistance to war, to militarism, to imperialism, to capitalism, to patriarchy, to white supremacy. Just to say those once again. We know on this fated night, 51 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated, murdered, for many of the reasons that our speakers have articulated. But let us keep in mind that he was in Memphis, in accord to align with some of the poorest paid workers, black men doing dirty, violent work. But he stood strong with them. The first of the year in '68 was something known as the so-called Tet Offensive. That's the international expression of the Vietnam War, where tons and tons of Agent Orange and other violent chemical warfare was poured on the Vietnamese people as they struggled for their own liberation. That too was connected, as we heard earlier, to the struggle that was going on in this country. In fact, 40% of the fighters were Black and poor men during that period. And we just heard about the 82nd and the powerful role they played in resistance. So we want to be very clear that we stand on the shoulders of earlier struggles. Yes. In 1966, the Panther Party had already articulated the demand to end police brutality on our people and to stop murdering Black people. They had already stood strong against the war in Vietnam. Even before that, in 1704, those rebellious Africans who were Maroons or Colombos were being hunted by the first slave patrols, which gave rise to the police. So we know this history is long and ignoble. So no compromise, no retreat in the fight to end war and militarism, racism. We know that yesterday the Black Alliance for Peace delivered thousands of signatures to the Congregational Black Caucus demanding action on AFRICOM. It was on October 1st that that particular campaign was initiated and continues. On the flip side of that campaign is the new initiative to bring that struggle home to its domestic side, as our sister Vanessa Beck just articulated to you. We will be working on ending police violence, controlling the police in the absolute sense of that word, as was mentioned earlier, ending the connection with Israel. That's the source of the broken windows policing that, New York, thank you, New York initiated. We know that this prison nation continues to incarcerate not only Black men, but Black women and Black children. So keep that in mind. We have already begun to develop fact sheets. A little bit of it was shared, but you may not know that, for example, militarization in a state like Georgia has, in fact, and I'll just read the statistic that we were able to find about Atlanta, and we're actually looking at 5 cities in terms of militarism and occupation in our communities in this country. But the Atlanta city participated in the Georgia International Law Enforcement Exchange that sends city police to Israel. The J20 Coalition demanded an end to participation in the program. In response, the mayor said, now you know who the mayor was, and in 2017 of February, that this program is necessary, appropriate, and successful to counter terrorism training. This training leads to the security of our community and, of course, the militarization and occupation of our communities. So we have work ahead. I'm proud to be a member of the research team, and I know that for those of you who are interested in actually getting involved, this is a defining moment. The work is before us, and as the sister said earlier, if not for us, certainly for our children. Thank you.
One more thing to do. And first, just let me say thank you to the committee that organized this incredible event tonight. And we were together all day. How many of y'all were at the protest earlier? How many of y'all were there when the cops tried to say we didn't have a permit? How many of y'all were present? Okay, UNAC was there. Who else was there? How many of you were, raise your hand if you were there? All right. So we've been going all day, and we ain't about playing now. We are really fired up. I feel sorry for somebody who come up on us right now. It'll be bad. It will be bad. The necklace will come back. And I can think of some people who need to be sized up and fitted for it and get some gallons of kerosene. I can think of some who need the necklace right now. And I would like them not to have clothes on. I just want them naked with the necklace. So we are about to leave, but I cannot, and I want to thank you for letting me be your guide through this evening. And remember, Jaribu said these things, nobody else. I would just like to bring up, since we are celebrating 2 years of the Black Alliance for Peace, look how much incredible work has been done. Incredible work over just a short period of time. It shows you how much we can do if we stand firm and stand together. Today we were with our comrades of all colors crying out for peace and justice. And like Peter Tosh said, I don't want no peace. I need equal rights and justice. And so no justice, no peace is more than just a chant. That's our demand. We cannot live in peace without justice and human rights for all. So I want to bring up, although I'm older, a little bit older than he is, I want to bring up my teacher and my comrade. I'd like him to come. I think it's just appropriate that the visionary, one of the visionaries, the most important issue that we have with each other is that we don't thank each other enough. We don't celebrate each other enough. But we need to celebrate those who stay on the battlefield. This brother has been there. And I think we should really stand to our feet and give Ajamu Baraka a loud round of liberation applause and ask him to come forward Ajamu, to close us out. Come forward, Ajamu.
Thank you, Jaribu. I wasn't supposed to be up here this evening. I was very comfortable sitting in front and listening to these fantastic presentations and being reminded of the kind of quality people that we've been able to bring together to build this new formation. So I'm here to thank all of you. This is a collective process. No one individual can do anything by themselves. And what we've been able to do is to bring together people from across this country who had a vision, who understood the responsibility that we have to ourselves and really to the world, to build a new anti-war, pro-peace, anti-imperialist movement here in this country.
That's right.
As we said before, it is vital, it is critical for us to do that. Not only for ourselves, but for the people who find themselves in the crosshairs of this gangster state.
That's right.
So I celebrate all of you. As we just pointed out, we've been at this since 7 o'clock this morning. On front of the State Department, marching to the King Memorial.
Yeah.
Saturday, we found ourselves in front of the White House.
Yeah.
Before that, some of us were in Venezuela in solidarity with the people. We have been doing some serious work here in this country, reviving this movement. So we leave here tonight with a mandate. Sister Gina laid it out for us.
Yes, she did.
Time out for talking.
That's right.
It is now ready, and we should be ready for real struggle. I'm ready. I know that folks in the Black Alliance for Peace are ready. I hope folks who are watching this live stream are ready. The struggle to build, to create power for ourselves, and to transform this country and to transform this world. That is our responsibility as human beings. We say, no compromise, no retreat. We struggle to win, and win we will do. Thank you, friends.
Yes.
Before we leave, we want to just remind folks, we struggle and we work hard. We also like to try to relax and to enjoy ourselves. After this gathering, our dear sister Vanessa, who is a celebrated MC, is going to be at the March Cafe, 3203 Mount Pleasant Street. It's free entry. We are doing this as an after party and a fundraiser for the Black Alliance for Peace. It starts at 10 p.m. and it goes to 2 a.m. Please find yourself in the house and let's enjoy ourselves and have some relaxation and get prepared for tomorrow and the struggle as we go forward. So again, let me also just say, as you all have seen, my dear sister, Jaribu, we go back decades. She has always been an inspiration for me and for many people across this country. This struggle could not be what it is today without her presence. We call her our family painter of today, and as you can see, why we in fact do that. So thank you so much, my sister. Thank you. Good night.